Welcome to Sub-Saharan Africa. So here on the left-hand side is a satellite image of Africa, in which in yellow, have denoted the boundaries of Sub-Saharan Africa. And for most of the boundaries, they're pretty obvious. Of course, the western and the southern and the eastern side, it's a big old ocean. That's the border. But to the north, it's a little bit more complicated. So there we have something called the African Transition Zone. So yeah, it's a solid line, but really regions don't do a good job as far as their borders, as far as separating different cultures. And so here we have a transition. It blends. And it not only does it blend in terms of physical environment, the blend from rainforest to grassland to desert, which we can see from dark green to tan, but also culturally. We're going to see, for example, language and religion. We're going to see differences on one side of the zone. To the north, you're more likely to find Arabic speakers who are Muslims. Where to the south, you're more likely to find non-Muslims who practice a variety of religions, but are also more ethnically Black African. So with transition zones, something's going to come up time and time again. Regions within Sub-Saharan Africa is West Africa. It's also referred to as the bulge because it kind of bulges out there in Africa. It's also referred to as the Gold Coast or the Ivory Coast or the Pepper Coast. That's a theme we're going to talk a lot about in this chapter, the idea of coasts, and basically all they thought of as resources. Oh, this is where we can find gold. This is where we can find ivory. This is where we can find pepper, but also where we can find slaves. And so a good amount of the Atlantic slave trade, the origins of a lot of those African slaves were over here in the part of Western Africa. So in West Africa, it's very, very diverse. You got a whole lot of different religions, a lot of different languages. And so that's one of the things to really look at it with West Africa is the complexity of all these different ethnic groups having to essentially get along in these countries that have been drawn for them. More of that to follow later. So here we see West Africa, which is, kind of tropical, definitely tropical, not as much of a dense tropical rainforest jungle. So it has more arable land in this particular area, and it's kind of bounded on its eastern edge by some highland areas that then blend over into the next particular sub-region. But so the big country here, like I said, is Nigeria. So when you have in this particular sub-region, the African Transition Zone coming through, that even further speaks to the ethnic diversity we should expect in this particular sub-region. The largest of our sub-regions of Sub-Saharan Africa is Central Africa, which we'll also refer to as Equatorial Africa or Tropical Africa. So what we got going on here is it's not as populated as West Africa, not as densely populated, but definitely covers a very, very, very large area. And so it's going to have a more variety of environments. And so it has that dense tropical rainforest, but it also has maybe the stereotypical parts of Africa that we think of, the safaris, the giraffes, the people shooting and killing lions. So all of that we can kind of typically think of Africa is pretty much Central Africa here. So one of the things you're also going to find is a lot of conflict, a lot of civil wars. You're also going to find, once again, resources. The focus in this particular area is going to be resources, particularly getting resources out, which can be a challenge because also in Central Africa, you have a lot of what we call landlocked countries that don't have access to a large ocean or sea. And so what we have going on here is a lot of countries who economically aren't doing so well. So the challenge they have is they might be small. They might also be landlocked. They might just have one or two resources that dominate. They might also not have a lot of, large population, not a lot of urban areas, more sparsely populated. And so economically, times are a little tougher here in Central Africa, which is perhaps a bit different than over here in East Africa, particularly the countries of Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, in which the economy there is actually growing. Guess what? We actually have companies in China, manufacturing outlets in China that are moving to this particular area of the world. And so more and more of our stuff is going to be manufactured in Africa. And so we can go ahead and expect East Africa to be the case. Now, East Africa is more complex than that. Once again, it's very diverse throughout much of Sub-Saharan Africa. And so while some countries that I've mentioned in East Africa already are doing quite well, we also have countries that aren't doing so well. And so Somalia, another part of East Africa. Now, some would say that Somalia and the Horn of Africa, which is that far right part, the far eastern part, that kind of that part that sticks out in Africa, should actually not even be part of Sub-Saharan Africa. A few different reasons for that. Languages, their language family is more connected to Northern Africa. Also look at religion, more likely to be Muslim in this particular area. But nonetheless, we'll go ahead and lump it in with East Africa since it's very much part of it connected in terms of physical geography. Next is Southern Africa, not to be confused with the country of South Africa. Southern Africa is actually a region. It includes South Africa, but also includes other countries. For example, Botswana and Zimbabwe. So Southern Africa, as we can see, it's a little bit farther from the equator, a little bit farther south from that dense tropical rainforest in Central Africa. So here we're going to get a variety of climates. We're going to get a little bit of a desert, we're going to get a little bit of a semi-arid steppe, but we're also going to get climates more similar to what we'd find in the United States and Europe, those sea climates, those comfortable climates, those climates that we typically associate with the mid-latitudes. And so down in the southern part, the southern tip of Africa, the southern tip of Southern Africa, we do find some more of those comfortable climates. And so because of that, we're going to find a little bit more agriculture in this area, but still, nonetheless, we're going to see a lot of resources. So, for example, diamonds. A lot of the world's diamonds come from this particular sub-region of Sub-Saharan Africa. Unfortunately, this is also where the AIDS crisis has definitely left its toll. So here we see huge amounts of the population is essentially missing as the AIDS crisis has either taken their lives or soon will. As far as the effects, the impacts of this AIDS crisis that was devastating more the last decade, will still be felt for a long time as we still kind of watch to see how birth rates change and adapt to such a large, particularly missing females that are currently in their 20s and 30s who essentially passed away and are no longer part of the population. Finally, Madagascar, a country, an island, became definitely more well known when it was the name of a movie. But Madagascar, it's essentially because of plate tectonics, it's kind of broken off of Africa. You can kind of see how it fits in like a puzzle piece. If you move it down a little bit to the left, it fits right in there with Africa. So one of the things is it's been a good thousands and thousands of years. Is essentially being isolated, being separated from the rest of the continent. So obviously certain animals can't, clear large amounts of water. And so one of the things is that isolation has kind of created this biodiversity. It's very unique. It's very diverse, but it's very much in Madagascar is, some of the only species in the world where you find them is on this island. And I haven't seen that movie, but I think that movie might be about that. So Madagascar, one of the problems though is the forests and a lot of the vegetation, a lot of the areas have been cleared. And so what that does is it removes vegetation that's only found in this particular area. But of course, the critters and the various animals and biodiversity is essentially becoming wiped out or very much endangered.